Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Corporate Quitter. If everyone else is as lost as you are, do you think that you would be in such a tizzy? If you weren't alone, would it really matter where you're at right now? I recently read a newsletter by Dan Coe, who, if you don't know who he is, he's phenomenal. I'm sure you've seen his little Instagram memes or little informational graphics, and they usually pack a punch. They're pretty insightful, even though they're pretty small in terms of like their, what's listed on there in terms of knowledge. They pack a punch. And I subscribe to his newsletter, and they're usually pretty insightful, much like his graphics online. And so this past week's, his was actually talking about the concept of being lost. And I've talked about being lost before. I feel like I'm lost very often. And I think we're also in this movement of authenticity online where more people are actually acknowledging, hey, like I'm lost and being lost is normal. Back then, you had a job, you had a steady income, you stayed in the same job for 40 years, you got married, you stayed in that relationship, whatever happened within it, whether there was affairs or not, or children or not, things pretty much were standard, right? There were always the people who were the outliers, the unconventional people who created the businesses or did things that were unique. But the way in which we lived was very, very simple, especially before the internet. But now, things have just like kind of exploded, right? And so part of that is there's an overwhelm in what to do with life, but also there's this feeling of just being lost. Like you're constantly behind, like you're never actually playing at the same level as your peers or really at anything. You just feel like you're so behind, even with your own goals and things like that. But number one, you can't really base your viewpoint on yourself based on history because history is not the same. Sure, there's the old adage of history repeats itself, and to an extent that is true. But what we're experiencing right now in this world has never happened before, right? We've never experienced a time of the internet, right? The internet didn't exist until the 90s. And now we're in the age of AI, and just things are evolving so quickly. And before we ourselves, our brain and our body can even acknowledge that change has happened and settle in that change, things are changing once again. So of course you're going to feel lost in addition to the societal pressures as, social media, TV shows, the news kind of put on you. Of course you're going to feel lost, and it's completely normal. One of the things that Dan Coe had said in his newsletter is that everyone is lost. Even the people who think that they're on track for certain things, they are lost too, only because, again, the nature of life changes so volatilely and so quickly than it did before because of the age of the internet and all of these things. I think back then life was a lot simpler, and in that case, it was really easy to fall into the, I don't want to say mediocrity category, but that category of living a simple, good life. And now, as we know too, as millennials, also, living a simple, good life isn't really as simple or good or even accessible as it was before. I don't know about you guys, I've always been ambitious, but I think sometimes I wish I could be a happy cog in the machine that is corporate. I wish I could be a happy cog in the machine that I've built for myself within entrepreneurship. But because of the way that the world is functioning right now and our economy and things like that, it's actually really difficult. I think sometimes I would have loved to stay in certain jobs had it paid and kind of kept up with income and housing. It's just like everything. But I had to job hop and I had to pivot and seek out other things, much like pursuing entrepreneurship for the sake of survival. Now, going back to the concept of being lost, one of the things that Dan had said, right, that everyone is lost, whether you're in the cog of the machine of corporate or you're doing something on your own or you're somewhere in the middle trying to figure your shit out, is that what often happens when we feel lost is that we seek to find answers within others. And the problem with that is people are obviously biased. They have their opinions of you, they have their viewpoints of you, some that are truthful, some that aren't, some that are one-sided, some that maybe aren't even 100%, aligned with what you want. You obviously want to seek out some support or guidance if you're lost from friends and family and people who know you closest. But also the problem with that is you have people in your world who, whether they know it or not, want to protect you. And so obviously they're keen on keeping you where you are. And I found this too. We often seek advice from people who are nowhere near where we want to go. So it's like the person who isn't not in a relationship and maybe never has been in one who is giving advice about being in a relationship. Now, you can have all the degrees in the world, right? You could say, I'm a globally recognized psychologist in relationships, or I have a podcast about relationships and dating, or like whatever the credentials are that you want to put in for that. But if you haven't actually reaped the rewards or even kind of scratched the surface, you really shouldn't be giving advice on the subject. And sure, there's the conversation of someone can give advice or kind of their feedback as they are undergoing their own transformation, right? That's how Corporate Quarter started. Was I was interviewing successful entrepreneurs so that when it came time building my own business, I was able to take that information and in real time implement it and then share with you guys what was going on and how those things were working out. Now, I think that's a bit of a different scenario. Part of it is advice, part of it is just like, hey, openly sharing. But the problem when you feel lost and you're seeking advice from others is obviously they don't know your full story. They are not you, so they cannot confirm or deny something that feels good or doesn't. Even if we were to get advice from someone who is quote unquote qualified, we know in our guts when things aren't aligned. One of the things I was reading in this newsletter was that he basically quoted, which is a little harsh but not entirely untrue, is that the quickest way to ruin your life is to essentially live by what others want of you or do what others say. And so going back to feeling lost, it's really easy to take advice from other people, but it's a lot harder to sit with your shit. I would encourage you to sit with your shit. And if you're interested, actually pursue what I did last week of a dopamine detox to get really quiet so you can be introspective and understand what it is that you want. But being lost is not a problem. It's actually the greatest place to be when you think about finding out what you want to do and who you want to be, because you get to start from a fresh like slate essentially. So you may have experience in the past and you may have dreams and things in the future, but because you're in the quote unquote lost phase, right? Things are a bit confusing. It actually gives you the playing field to actually play instead of being really focused on one specific thing and not being open to other opportunities or experiences that could actually completely change your life. And so part of that I bring up is because, again, I'm going through a similar sort of lost phase of like, I'm not really quite sure what I'm supposed to be doing. And this to me, I feel like happens every other month. This isn't something that happens, yearly or quarterly. It happens pretty frequent. And I find with a lot of entrepreneurs, it's very similar, and no one really prepared me for that when I started this, because I thought, much like corporate, when they tell you who to be and how you can achieve success and kind of put you on this pathway without really much wiggle room, it becomes a little hard to navigate the lost because you feel like there's something wrong with you, but there's actually nothing wrong with you. And being lost is a really fun place to be because it's yet again another time to reevaluate and kind of audit everything and say, hey, am I actually happy with this? Right? Do I actually want this, or is this something that my parents want or my spouse wants or a friend or I don't know, society? Like even one of the things I had been talking about recently is when I was younger, I really wanted to be this big, bold person, right? I wanted to be on Forbes 30 under 30 and I wanted to be this person of power and kind of, I felt I had a message and a mission to do and share. And okay, I'm doing the podcast and all that stuff. And I've been in kind of this crossroads the past few years of like, well, do you have to build this massive vision and legacy? Do you have to build a company? Because with being the corporate quitter, right, essentially I'm choosing the unconventional. I'm choosing to quit corporate and to re-engage with the corporate mentality by having dozens of employees and millions of dollars and with right all these systems and processes and things that I ultimately hated when I was in corporate just to create them myself didn't really feel on brand for me. It didn't feel like it was within like it didn't feel ethical for me. And that even goes for the way that I conduct business now and the way that I make money. So my first year in business, or I would say like halfway point of business to my first full year in business, I was pursuing the influencer game. So I thought, okay, I'm running a podcast, I'm building and growing a following rapidly, and I'm doing a media tour. Sure, I'll try the influencer game. And I mean, there's great money to be made in that. I think on TikTok, I have about 47,000 followers, and of course, sprinkled throughout Instagram and whatnot, a couple other thousand. And that's great, right? It means that people are following for a specific reason. It means that whatever I'm creating has value and vision and all of that. But the problem with being an influencer is that, number one, you put yourself back in the game of being a marionette in a corporate person's kind of world, right? But then the other problem is then all I'm doing is selling things. And that's not really why I wanted to do what I did. Of course, in business, you have to sell things, services, products, all of that. But at what point do you cross the line, right? at what point is it too much selling? At what point are you doing a disservice to the people that are in your world? In this case, you guys, right? My audience. And so, just for context, being at the level that I'm at now with the followers that I have, I can usually negotiate about $1,000 for a single video, about 45 minutes or so. There's some storyboarding that's required. So we come up with a concept, we get the concept approved by the company that I'm doing a brand deal with. We do some iterations and drafts of the video. And then once they approve it and they like it, then I post it. And then we cross our fingers and hope that the algorithm takes it. Now, in my experience, I've had some videos do well and some not. And ultimately, even as a marketer, sometimes you can't predict what's going to happen. Sometimes things, just the timing of certain things, holidays, just what's going on in the world, so many different things can change the way that a video lands. And so for me, it was always stressful. It still to this day is stressful. And why I don't do influencer and brand deal things is because I, number one, don't want to become a machine where all I'm doing is creating videos that are viral hits for the sake of selling a service. And number two, it also gives me anxiety of I know that this company had paid a certain amount of money for this video to perform or create some sort of ROI for them. And now I feel a bit gross and it's not doing what it's supposed to. And we talk about recreating the video. And then my audience, you guys kind of know what the jig is up. And I don't know, it just gets really, really weird. And I know a lot of influencers and people in the space who do a phenomenal job so that their brand deals and their videos that are created from it, right? The content that's created from it looks great and it doesn't look like a brand deal. And it's honest, right? And most of the things that I've been boasting about or quote unquote selling across my page the past few years was not just for shits and giggles. It was things that I actually believed in. And I've been really picky about those things. But even with that, there's a sense of, again, you're playing a game. And I don't really want to be a pawn in someone else's game. I don't want to have to get sign off for my creative process and the way that I view things. I've gone viral. I've done those things. I've reached millions of people through videos and stuff. And I don't necessarily want to bring that into the hands of corporate to sell you shit that you possibly don't even need. And so here I am again, being 3 years in business and having this conversation with myself of what are we supposed to do in business, right? And so the lost feeling comes with okay, we've done all these things, right? If just again for context for the brand deal stuff, haven't done one in a really long time. I did one last year for a product that I really believed in, and that was $1,000. And the entirety of my time in business, I think I've done roughly 30,000 in brand deals. And then I was this doesn't really feel in alignment unless it's something that I use every single day, like my press on nails or whatever it is that in my business, like certain products and subscriptions, I really don't want to do brand deals. It's just not in alignment. And especially in the way that people have done them prior or kind of what the precedent is for them. And then I look at all the other avenues of business, right? I've sold digital products, done courses, I've done one-on-one groups, I've done group programs, I do freelance work. I've kind of done a zillion different things. I haven't yet created and sold a physical product yet. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I've done t-shirts, I've done journals. I haven't created something completely from scratch, right, through a manufacturer, but I don't even know what that would be at this point. But there are all these different things that I've been doing. And so, of course, when I'm at this 3-year mark, again, my quitterversary was about a month ago. The podcast is going to hit its 3-year anniversary May 1st. So in about a month, 2 months. And I'm kind of okay, what is the next step in business, right? What else? And then as the artist, right, looking at myself and being okay, if you're as a creative and your natural inclination is to innovate, which is, right, create new ideas and new thought processes and creative thinking, which is, right, then art, what would be the next iteration, right? Maybe what I'm looking for in business actually hasn't been created yet, or it's not mainstream, right? Which is what corporate quitter is. It's unconventionality. And so going back to the concept of being lost and all that, the one thing here to remind yourself is that there's nothing wrong with being lost, and it will come often. And the more often that it comes, I think it's actually a blessing because it reminds you of hey, what are my values and what's important to me and what needs to change in order for this to be something that I actually want to sustain and grow with, right? Because the worst thing you can do is create something on autopilot that you actually grow to hate, that doesn't meet your goals, and also at the same time puts you in a place that it's nothing like the lifestyle you wanted. And one of the things I was thinking about today, I don't use an alarm clock and I kind of wake up whenever. And when I do wake up, I journal, I'll read a little, I sip on my coffee or my tea, I might go for a walk. Sometimes I just kind of twiddle around. I'll do art, I'll do painting, I'll do a little client work, then I'll go back to playing. And like, I have calls and things, of course, but it actually is really amazing to think, okay, I've somehow replicated my corporate income doing a fraction of the work, and my day can be however it wants to be. So today, actually, after I do these recordings, I'm going to Barton Springs to go swim and play because it's going to be 89 degrees here today in Austin. And that would never be a possibility when I was in corporate. And so that in itself is a blessing. Remember, if you don't know what you want, you're going to be told what you want, and you'll probably believe it. It's okay to not know what you want, but don't be confused by other people's goals and their games and the things that they tell you as truth for yourself. Use your own discernment, play around with the idea. You don't even have to throw it out completely what they're saying, but just take it with a grain of salt, apply it for maybe a second, a week, a month, a year, and then change again. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually what nature's compass is, right? It's directing you where you're supposed to go. And ultimately, I think all of us can agree, even if we maybe don't fully see it in the full picture, but we see it in pieces, is that we ultimately end up becoming exactly who we want to be. And that's kind of fucking cool. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.